The morning sun blazed over Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, casting sharp shadows across the training grounds. Lieutenant Jake Morrison adjusted his worn baseball cap, the faded SEAL Trident barely visible on the front. 28 years old, 6 feet of lean muscle, hardened by 3 combat deployments. He carried himself with the confident swagger that came from surviving what most people only saw in movies. Behind him, his team of 4 operators moved through their morning routine, push-ups, pull-ups, weapon drills. The familiar rhythm of preparation that never stopped, never slowed, because complacency in their world measured itself in body bags and flag-draped coffins. The obstacle course stretched before them like a mechanical dragon. Walls to climb, ropes to swing, barriers to vault. Morrison had run this course hundreds of times, knew every handhold and footfall, could complete it blindfolded if necessary. Today was different, though. Today they had observers. A small group stood near the starting line. Clipboard warriors, Morrison called them privately. Administrative staff, logistics personnel, the support apparatus that kept the military machine functioning but rarely got their hands dirty. Among them, a woman in standard Navy working uniform stood slightly apart from the others. Maybe 5'6", slim build, dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. She held a tablet and seemed to be taking notes. Morrison's teammate, Petty Officer First Class Ryan Chen, nudged him with an elbow. "Check out the observers. Probably here to make sure we're being politically correct while we train to eliminate threats," Morrison grinned. "Yeah, I wouldn't want to offend anyone while we're learning how to survive combat." He raised his voice slightly, projecting toward the observers. "All right, gentlemen, standard run. Full gear, full speed. Last one to finish buys beer tonight." The team moved to the starting line, 50 pounds of tactical equipment strapped to each operator. Body armor, weapons, ammunition, medical supplies. The weight that became so familiar, it felt wrong to move without it. Morrison glanced back at the woman with the tablet. She was watching them now, her expression neutral but focused. Something about the way she stood, the way she held herself, registered in his operator's brain. Not quite right. Not quite fitting the profile of typical administrative staff. But he dismissed the thought. Probably just another efficiency consultant hired to tell them they needed to train smarter, not harder. "On your mark," Morrison called. 3, 2, 1, go. They exploded forward. Morrison led, Chen close behind. The other 3 operators spread in tight formation. The first obstacle was an 8-foot wall. Morrison hit it at full speed, planted 1 foot halfway up, grabbed the top edge and hauled himself over in one smooth motion. 12 years of training, 6 years of operational experience made the movement as natural as breathing. Behind him, he heard the grunts and impacts of his team following. Good times considering the gear weight. They were maintaining their edge, staying sharp, despite being 3 weeks out from their last deployment. The course continued. Rope climb, tire run, balance beam, cargo net. Morrison's lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but he pushed harder. This was the grinder, the place where SEAL candidates discovered whether they had what it took. For active operators, it was church, the sacred space where they proved to themselves that they still belonged among the elite. He crossed the finish line at 12 minutes 40 seconds. Solid time. Chen finished 8 seconds behind him, grinning despite the sweat pouring down his face. "Not bad for an old man," Chen gasped, hands on his knees. "Old man?" Morrison shot back. "I'm 28. I've got at least another decade of kicking doors before my knees give out." The rest of the team finished within 30 seconds of each other. They gathered near the finish line, catching their breath, already analyzing their performance, identifying moments where they could have moved faster, transitioned smoother, maintained better form. Morrison noticed the woman with the tablet had moved closer. She was maybe 20 feet away now, still taking notes. He caught her eye and raised his voice slightly. "Hope we're meeting your standards. Wouldn't want the Navy spending taxpayer money on substandard operators." The woman looked up from her tablet. Her expression didn't change. "You completed the course in acceptable timeframes. Your transitions between obstacles showed practiced efficiency. The comment was neutral, professional, giving nothing away. Chen laughed. Acceptable. Lady, that was better than acceptable. That was 12 guys with full combat loads moving, like we're running for ice cream. The woman's eyes shifted to Chen. Have you completed this course without equipment? In running shoes instead of combat boots? Under optimal conditions, rather than training conditions. Chen's smile faded slightly. Well, yeah, sure. We've all done speed runs. Then you understand that context matters when evaluating performance. What looks impressive in one situation might be merely adequate in another. Morrison felt his jaw tighten. There was something in her tone, not condescending exactly, but carrying weight that suggested she knew more than she was revealing. Who are you exactly? He asked. Which office sent you to critique our training? The woman glanced at her tablet, then back at Morrison. I'm here to observe and document training protocols. My evaluation will be included in the quarterly readiness assessment. That's not what I asked. I asked who you are. Name, rank, department. For the first time, the woman's expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but something close. Information that will be provided if it becomes relevant to your duties, Lieutenant Morrison. The use of his rank surprised him. He hadn't introduced himself, hadn't worn name tape on his training gear. She'd either done her homework or had access to information that most observers didn't. Chen stepped forward, his earlier humor gone. Ma'am, with respect, we have security protocols here. Observers need proper credentials and clearances. You need to identify yourself or we'll need to contact security. The woman reached into her pocket and produced an identification card. She held it up briefly, too quick for Morrison to read the details, then returned it to her pocket. My credentials are current and verified. Commander Jackson approved my presence this morning. If you have concerns, you're welcome to contact him directly. Morrison exchanged glances with Chen. Commander Jackson was their commanding officer, a no-nonsense veteran who didn't tolerate administrative interference. If he'd approved this observer, there was probably a good reason. Still, something bothered Morrison about the whole situation. The morning continued. The team moved through additional drills, weapons training at the firing range, close quarters combat scenarios in the kill house, tactical medical response exercises. Each activity was standard, part of their regular rotation. But Morrison found himself increasingly aware of the woman's presence. She moved between observation points with quiet efficiency. Never in the way, never drawing attention, but always there, always watching, always taking notes. And several times, Morrison caught her doing something that administrative observers never did. She was analyzing their techniques with the eye of someone who understood tactical operations, not just documenting for reports. During a break around noon, Morrison approached her directly. She was standing near the equipment shed, reviewing something on her tablet. I've been doing this job for 6 years, Morrison said without preamble. Trained hundreds of candidates, worked with dozens of observers, efficiency experts, safety inspectors, congressional staffers, journalists with clearances. You don't move like any of them. The woman looked up from her tablet. Her eyes were dark, unreadable. How do I move, Lieutenant? Like someone who knows what they're looking at. Like someone who's run these drills before, not just observed them. He paused. You're not administrative staff, are you? The woman was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm here to complete an evaluation. My background and qualifications are sufficient for that purpose. Beyond that, my personal history isn't relevant to your training schedule. Morrison felt his frustration building. Listen, I don't know who you are or what you're really doing here, but my team operates in life and death situations. We need to know who's watching us, who's evaluating us, who has access to our techniques and tactics. So I'm going to ask one more time, who are you? The woman met his gaze directly. And if I choose not to answer, then I'm going to contact Commander Jackson and request that you be removed from the training area until you provide proper identification. That's your prerogative, Lieutenant. The woman's tone remained neutral, though I should mention that Commander Jackson's approval came from someone considerably higher in the chain of command. Removing me would require explanations you might not be prepared to provide. Morrison stared at her. This was getting stranger by the minute. Higher up the chain of command? What did that mean? And why would a senior officer care about routine training observations? Before he could respond, Chen appeared at his elbow. Jake, we've got the afternoon scenario starting in 15. Urban warfare simulation in Building 7. Morrison nodded, still watching the woman. This conversation isn't over. I didn't imagine it was, she replied calmly. The afternoon scenario was one of Morrison's favorites. Building 7 was a 3-story structure designed to replicate urban combat environments. Narrow hallways, multiple rooms, stairs and corners where threats could hide. The team would move through in tactical formation, engaging simulated enemy combatants marked by electronic sensors. Morrison gathered his team in the staging area outside Building 7. All right, standard rules. Live communications, simulated ammunition, full tactical discipline. We move room by room, clear every space, maintain formation integrity. Questions. The team shook their heads. They'd done this scenario dozens of times. Knew the building layout, understood the likely threat positions. Worked together with the kind of seamless coordination that only came from shared combat experience. Morrison noticed the woman had followed them to Building 7. She stood near the entrance, tablet ready, clearly intending to observe the scenario. He considered objecting, but decided against it. Let her watch. Let her see what real operators looked like in action. Maybe then she'd understand that critiquing their performance required more than administrative credentials. The team entered the building. Morrison took point, weapon raised, moving with controlled aggression through the first hallway. Behind him, Chen covered the rear. The other operators spread in formation, each responsible for specific zones of observation and fire. The first room appeared empty. Morrison sliced the pie, checking corners systematically, clear, moving to room 2. They progressed through the first floor without contact. The building was silent except for their breathing and the soft padding of boots on concrete. Tension built with each step. Somewhere in this structure, simulated threats waited. Finding them before they found you was the difference between completing the mission and ending up in a body bag. Stairwell ahead, Morrison whispered into his radio. Ascending to second floor. Chen, hold position at stairs. Cover our exit route. Roger that, Chen responded. Morrison started up the stairs, weapon tracking his line of sight. This was a fatal funnel, a narrow space where attackers had every advantage. Training had taught him to move quickly, minimize exposure time, trust his team to cover his vulnerable moments. He reached the second floor landing and immediately detected movement. Electronic sensor activated, signaling a simulated enemy combatant in the hallway. Morrison's training took over. Weapon up, controlled pair of simulated shots, target neutralized. Time elapsed. 2.3 seconds from detection to engagement, the team flowed onto the second floor. Room clearing resumed. Morrison's mind operated in that heightened state of awareness that combat demanded. Hyper-focused, processing dozens of inputs simultaneously, making split-second decisions that training had programmed into his reflexes. They cleared 3 rooms, found and engaged 4 more simulated threats. Morrison's confidence built with each successful engagement. This was what they did. This was what they'd trained for. Hundreds of hours of practice, culminating in movements so smooth they looked easy. Then Morrison made his mistake. He entered room 7 without properly checking the corner. A blind spot hidden from his initial scan. The electronic sensor shrieked, signaling a simulated enemy engagement from his unprotected flank. In a real combat situation, that oversight would have killed him. Morrison froze. The scenario's computer system registered his error, marking him as a simulated casualty. His weapon locked, disabled by the training system. He was effectively dead, taken out by a threat he should have anticipated. The team continued without him, completing the scenario successfully. But Morrison remained in room 7, staring at the corner he'd missed, replaying the moment of failure. 6 years of operational experience, and he'd made a rookie mistake. Gotten sloppy, Let familiarity breed carelessness. When the scenario ended and the team regrouped outside, Morrison's mood was dark. Jen tried to lighten the atmosphere with a joke, but Morrison wasn't having it. "I screwed up," he said flatly. "Failed to clear the corner. In real combat, I'd be dead and you'd be dragging my body out. Everyone makes mistakes," Chen offered. "That's why we train. Better to fail here than downrange." But Morrison couldn't shake the feeling. He'd been so confident, so sure of his abilities. And in one careless moment, he'd proven that confidence could be dangerous. That the moment you stopped being vigilant was the moment combat killed you. The woman with the tablet approached as the team was packing up. She'd observed the entire scenario from a control room, with video feeds from inside the building. "Lieutenant Morrison," she said quietly, "may I speak with you privately?" Morrison's jaw tightened. He really wasn't in the mood for critique from an observer who probably had never set foot in a real combat zone. But refusing would be unprofessional. "Sure," he said shortly. "What do you need?" They walked a short distance from the team. The woman stopped and turned to face him directly. "You entered room 7 without properly clearing the corner," she said. "It was a tactical error that resulted in simulated casualty." Morrison felt his temper flare. "Yeah, I noticed. Thanks for the observation. I'm sure it'll look great in your report." The woman ignored his sarcasm. "Can you tell me what you were thinking in the moment before you entered that room?" "What I was thinking?" Morrison's voice rose slightly. "I was thinking about completing the mission, about moving through the building efficiently, about maintaining formation with my team, and you were confident," the woman said. "It wasn't a question. You'd cleared 6 rooms successfully. You were in a rhythm, moving smoothly. Everything felt natural." Morrison stared at her. "How did you know?" "Because that's when operators make mistakes, when everything feels easy, when confidence overrides caution." The woman's voice remained calm, but carried an undertone of something Morrison couldn't quite identify. "Combat doesn't reward confidence, Lieutenant. It rewards vigilance. The moment you think you've got it figured out is the moment you get killed." Morrison felt his anger draining, replaced by confusion. "Who are you? Seriously, who are you?" The woman held his gaze for a long moment. Then she said something that made Morrison's blood run cold. "Someone who's made the same mistake you just made. Except I made it in Ramadi in 2006, and it cost me 2 team members before I learned the lesson you're learning now." Morrison's mind raced. Ramadi, 2006. That was Second Battle of Ramadi, one of the bloodiest urban combat operations of the Iraq War. SEALs had been heavily involved. Multiple teams, dozens of operators, classified operations that most people would never know happened. You were there. Morrison's voice came out quieter than he intended. You're a SEAL." The woman's expression didn't change. "I'm an observer completing an evaluation. That's all you need to know right now." But Morrison's operator brain was now processing details he'd missed before. The way she moved, not like administrative staff, like someone with tactical training. The way she analyzed their performance, not from a manual, from experience. The way she'd known exactly what he was thinking in room 7, because she'd been there, done that. Survived the consequences. "What's your rank?" he asked suddenly. The question came out more aggressively than he'd intended. "If you're evaluating us, I need to know your rank." The woman's lips curved into the smallest smile. "Careful, Lieutenant. You might not like the answer to that question. Try me." The woman glanced at her tablet, then back at Morrison. "The afternoon is almost over. Your team has additional training scheduled tomorrow morning, correct?" "Yeah, maritime operations. Beach infiltration exercises. I'll be observing those as well." She started to turn away, then paused. "Lieutenant Morrison, you're a good operator. Experienced, skilled, dedicated. But you're getting comfortable. And comfortable gets people killed. Think about that tonight." She walked away before Morrison could respond. He stood there watching her go, his mind churning through possibilities. Who was she? If she'd been in Ramadi, if she'd served with SEALs, why was she now working as an observer? And why wouldn't she identify herself properly? Chen approached, seeing Morrison's expression. "Everything okay?" Morrison shook his head slowly. "I don't know. Something's going on. Something we're not being told. With the observer lady. Yeah, Morrison watched the woman disappear around a building corner. She's not who she appears to be, and I'm going to find out who she really is. That evening, Morrison sat in his small apartment off base, laptop open, researching. He'd tried the official personnel databases, but they required credentials he didn't have. He'd called Commander Jackson's office, but the commander was away at a conference. He'd even reached out to contacts at SEAL Team headquarters, but nobody had information about mysterious observers evaluating training operations. Finally, around 2200 hours, his phone rang. "Unknown number, Morrison," he answered. "Lieutenant, this is Commander Jackson." The voice was gruff, tired, carrying the weight of too many years and too many deployments. "I understand you've been asking questions about the observer at your training today." "Yes, sir." Morrison sat up straighter instinctively. "Sir, with respect, who is she?" "She implied she has operational experience, possibly SEAL experience, but she won't identify herself properly. My team needs to know who's evaluating us." Commander Jackson was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Listen carefully, Morrison. That observer has clearances and authority that go way above your pay grade. Way above mine, too, if I'm being honest. She's there because someone at the Pentagon decided your team needed evaluation by someone with real-world experience." "But who is she?" "Someone who's forgotten more about special operations than most of us will ever know." Jackson's voice softened slightly. "Morrison, I'm going to give you some advice. Stop asking questions. Stop digging. Complete your training, be professional, and let her do her job. Because if you push too hard and make the wrong people unhappy, it won't be her who faces consequences. It'll be you, sir. I just want to know her rank." "That's a reasonable question, is it?" Jackson asked. "Or is it ego? Are you uncomfortable being evaluated by someone who might outrank you? Someone who might know more than you? Think about that." The call ended. Morrison stared at his phone, Commander Jackson's words echoing in his mind. Was it ego? Was he so uncomfortable with the idea that this woman might be his superior that he couldn't accept her presence? He thought about the day's events, the way she'd analyzed their training, the way she'd understood his mistake in Room 7, the way she'd spoken about Ramadi, about lessons learned through blood and sacrifice. If she really was a veteran SEAL, if she really had operational experience that matched or exceeded his own, then maybe her evaluation carried weight he should respect rather than resent. But something still bothered him. Why the secrecy? Why not just introduce herself properly, establish her credentials, let them know who they were dealing with? Unless there was a reason, unless her identity itself was classified or sensitive or complicated in ways Morrison couldn't yet understand. He closed his laptop and went to bed. But sleep came slowly, and when it did, it brought dreams of urban combat and missed corners and the sound of simulated weapons fire that felt too much like real memories from deployments that never quite faded. Tomorrow would bring more training, more observation, and maybe, if Morrison was smart and patient, some answers to questions he wasn't entirely sure he wanted answered. The next morning broke clear and cold. Morrison's team gathered at the beach staging area at 0600 hours. The ocean stretched before them, dark and restless, small waves breaking against the sand. Maritime infiltration exercises meant swimming in full gear, navigating through surf, approaching a simulated hostile shoreline without detection. Morrison checked his equipment methodically. Dry bag sealed properly, communications gear waterproofed, weapons secured. The routine was so familiar, it happened almost automatically, leaving his mind free to wander. The woman with the tablet appeared at 0615. She wore the same Navy working uniform, carrying the same tablet, looking exactly as she had the previous day. But Morrison saw her differently now. After Commander Jackson's warning, after his own late-night reflection, he was starting to understand that this evaluation was more important than he'd initially realized. The woman approached Morrison directly. "Lieutenant, may I ask what you're training for today?" "Maritime infiltration," Morrison replied, keeping his tone professional. Swimming approach to hostile beach, establishing foothold, preparing for follow-on forces. The woman nodded. Have you completed this exercise before? Dozens of times. In training and operationally. Then you're familiar with the challenges. Cold water fatigue, equipment management, maintaining tactical awareness while physically exhausted. Morrison studied her face, looking for clues. You sound like you've done it yourself. I've read the training manuals, the woman replied evenly. They're quite detailed, but Morrison wasn't fooled anymore. Training manuals didn't give you the kind of understanding she was demonstrating. Only experience did that. Only swimming through freezing water in the middle of the night, pushing through exhaustion and hypothermia, and the voice in your head screaming to quit, taught you what these exercises really demanded. The team entered the water at 06:30. The shock of cold hit Morrison like a physical blow. 52-degree water, cold enough to steal your breath, cold enough to make your muscles cramp if you didn't keep moving. He forced himself forward, swimming steadily, focusing on form and breathing and the shoreline objective 300 meters away. Behind him, his team spread in formation. They'd practiced this evolution so many times, it was almost automatic. But almost wasn't good enough. In real operations, almost got you killed. Morrison's arms burned. His legs felt heavy. The dry bag on his back seemed to grow heavier with each stroke. But he pushed through, maintaining pace, refusing to show weakness. The shoreline grew closer. 200 meters, 150, 100. Then Morrison saw something that made him forget his exhaustion. The woman observer wasn't standing on the beach where she'd been when they entered the water. She was in the water, swimming. Not just standing in the shallows, but actually swimming. Parallel to Morrison's team, matching their pace, moving with a fluid efficiency that spoke of serious training. Morrison's surprise cost him his rhythm. He swallowed water, coughed, had to stop and tread water for a moment to recover. By the time he got himself together, the woman had swum past him, still maintaining perfect form, heading toward the beach. What the actual heck? Chen gasped beside him. Is she racing us? Morrison didn't answer. He was too busy pushing himself harder, trying to catch up, his competitive instinct overriding his exhausted muscles. But the woman reached the beach first. She stood in the shallows, not even breathing hard, watching Morrison's team emerge from the water one by one. Morrison stumbled onto the sand, gasping, his legs shaking with cold and exhaustion. The woman stood nearby, her uniform soaked, but her posture composed. She wasn't even shivering. Morrison tried to speak, but his teeth were chattering too hard. That was a good swim. The woman's expression remained neutral. You slowed down at the 200-meter mark, lost your rhythm. In the real operation, that delay could compromise the mission timeline. Morrison wanted to argue, wanted to point out that he'd been surprised by her presence in the water. But he recognized the truth in her observation. He had lost focus, had let external factors disrupt his performance. The rest of the team emerged from the water, all of them staring at the woman with new understanding. She hadn't just observed their swim. She'd participated, competed, and beaten most of them to the beach. Chen approached, still catching his breath. Ma'am, that was impressive. Most observers don't actually get in the water. The woman checked her tablet, which somehow had remained dry in a protective case. Most observers haven't completed SEAL qualification training. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. SEAL qualification training. She'd just confirmed what Morrison had suspected. She wasn't just an observer, she was one of them, or had been, which raised about 1,000 new questions. So you are a SEAL, Morrison said. It wasn't really a question. I completed the training, the woman replied carefully. Whether I currently hold that designation depends on your definition of active service. Morrison's mind raced. Completed the training but not active service. That suggested she was retired or transferred or something else. But she moved like an active operator, swam like someone who maintained peak physical fitness, analyzed tactics like someone who still lived and breathed special operations. What's your name? Morrison asked. Just your name. I think we've earned that much. The woman looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Captain. You can call me Captain. That was an 06 rank. 2 full grades above Morrison's 03. Morrison felt his stomach drop. He'd been questioning her authority, demanding identification, basically treating a superior officer like an administrative inconvenience. "Ma'am," Morrison snapped to attention. "I apologize. I didn't realize your rank. I should have been more respectful." The captain, waved off his apology. "At ease, Lieutenant. You didn't know because I chose not to reveal that information. That was deliberate. I wanted to observe how your team functioned without the distraction of rank consciousness." "But why?" Morrison asked. "Why hide your rank? Why not just introduce yourself properly?" "Because people change their behavior when they know they're being evaluated by senior officers," the captain said. "They become cautious, careful, less authentic. I needed to see how you really operate, how you really think, how you really train. And now I have." She turned to address the entire team. "You're good operators, well-trained, experienced, effective. But you've become comfortable. You've started to believe that because you've survived deployments, because you've succeeded in the past, that you'll automatically succeed in the future. That's dangerous thinking." Morrison felt defensive, but forced himself to listen. "In room 7 yesterday," the captain continued, "Lieutenant Morrison made a rookie mistake because he was overconfident. Today, during the swim, he lost focus because he was surprised. Small errors. But in real combat, small errors compound. They cascade. They get people killed." She paused, letting her words sink in. "My evaluation will recommend additional training focus on maintaining vigilance, even during routine operations. On expecting the unexpected. On never assuming that today's mission will be like yesterday's." The team stood silent, absorbing the critique. Morrison wanted to argue, wanted to defend their performance. But he couldn't, because she was right. They had gotten comfortable, had started to coast on experience rather than pushing themselves to improve. The captain looked directly at Morrison. "Lieutenant, you asked me yesterday what I was doing here. I'm going to tell you. 3 months ago, a SEAL team in Afghanistan got hit during what should have been a routine extraction. 4 operators wounded, 2 critically. All because they assumed the mission would go smoothly. Because they'd run the same type of operation dozens of times without incident. Because they were comfortable." Her voice hardened slightly. "Comfort kills operators. My job is to identify teams that are getting too comfortable and shake them up before they deploy into situations where comfort costs lives. Your team is good, but good isn't enough when the stakes are people coming home alive or coming home in boxes." The words landed like hammer blows. Morrison felt ashamed, angry, defensive, and grudgingly respectful all at once. This wasn't some pencil pusher critiquing their performance. This was a senior operator, someone who'd been where they were going, telling them hard truths they needed to hear. "Understood, ma'am," Morrison said quietly. The captain's expression softened slightly. "I'm not trying to destroy your confidence, Lieutenant. I'm trying to refine it. There's a difference between being confident and being complacent. You and your team need to rediscover that difference before your next deployment." She checked her tablet again. "I'll be observing your training for the rest of this week. After that, I'll submit my evaluation to SOCOM. What they do with it is above my pay grade. But I'll tell you now, my recommendation will be that your team is deployable, but needs to refocus on fundamentals." Morrison nodded. He wanted to ask more questions, wanted to know about her background, her experience, the operations she'd run that gave her the authority to evaluate his team. But Commander Jackson's warning echoed in his memory. "Stop asking questions. Be professional. Let her do her job, ma'am," Morrison said instead. "Thank you for the evaluation. We'll work on the issues you've identified." The captain met his eyes. "That's all I can ask, Lieutenant." She turned and walked back toward the base, leaving Morrison's team standing on the beach, cold and wet, and thinking about lessons they thought they'd already learned, but apparently needed to learn again. Chen approached Morrison quietly. "So she's a captain. In 06, that means she's senior to pretty much everyone on this base except the Admiral." "Yeah," Morrison said. which means everything we've said and done for the past 2 days has been observed and evaluated by someone who could end our careers with one report. Chen winced. Think she will? Morrison watched the captain's receding figure. No, I think she's trying to help us. Trying to make sure we don't make mistakes downrange that we can't take back. He turned to face his team. All right, listen up. For the rest of this week, we train like our lives depend on it. Because they do. The captain's evaluation might seem harsh, but she's right. We've gotten comfortable. That changes now. Starting today, we remember that every drill, every exercise, every training evolution is preparing us for real combat where there are no second chances. The team nodded, understanding settling over them. This wasn't about ego or pride anymore. It was about survival. About being the kind of operators who came home from every mission. About earning the respect of a captain who'd already proven she knew what she was talking about. Morrison gathered his gear and started the walk back to base. His body ached from the cold water. His mind churned with new awareness of his own vulnerabilities. But for the first time in months, he felt truly challenged, truly tested, truly reminded of why SEAL training never really ended, because the moment you stopped learning was the moment you started dying. And Morrison had just been given a harsh reminder that he still had a lot to learn. The week ended with a ceremony Morrison hadn't expected. Commander Jackson assembled the entire SEAL training command in the main briefing room. Over 200 personnel packed the space, everyone wondering what warranted such a gathering. The captain stood at the front, now wearing her full-dress uniform. Morrison's breath caught when he saw the ribbons. Navy Cross, Silver Star, 3 bronze stars with valor devices. Purple Heart, Combat Action Ribbon with 5 stars. Presidential Unit Citation. The chest full of decorations told a story of extraordinary service and sacrifice. Commander Jackson stepped to the podium. Today, we recognize someone whose service has been largely unknown due to operational security requirements. Captain Elena Rodriguez served 12 years in naval special warfare. She led classified operations across 4 theaters. Her teams completed 47 missions with 0 friendly casualties. She's the most decorated female SEAL in Navy history. The room erupted in applause. Morrison felt his face flush, remembering every dismissive comment, every moment he'd questioned her authority. Captain Rodriguez raised her hand for silence. They came here because Lieutenant Morrison's team represents the future of naval special warfare. They're skilled, dedicated, and experienced. But experience without humility becomes arrogance, and arrogance gets operators killed. She looked directly at Morrison. This week I pushed you, challenged you, made you uncomfortable. Not because you're failing, but because you're capable of more. Never stop learning. Never assume you've mastered anything. The moment you think you know everything is the moment you become vulnerable. After the ceremony, Morrison approached her. Ma'am, I owe you an apology. I disrespected you through ignorance. Captain Rodriguez smiled. You treated an unknown observer with appropriate caution. That's not disrespect, Lieutenant. That's good operational security. She extended her hand. You're a good operator, Morrison. Stay humble and you'll be a great one. Morrison shook her hand, feeling the calluses that matched his own. Thank you, ma'am, for everything. As Captain Rodriguez walked away, Chen appeared at Morrison's shoulder. Think we learned our lesson? Morrison watched her disappear through the door. Yeah, never judge a book by its cover. And never assume the person observing you doesn't have more experience than everyone in the room combined. The ultimate lesson had been delivered. Respect was earned through action, not assumed through appearance. And sometimes the most important teachers arrived in the most unexpected packages.